Call the meeting order and welcome everybody to the July 13th, 2026 council work session. Can I get a roll call, please?
Councillor Blank,
Here.
Councillor Dowd,
Here.
Councillor Waterman,
Here.
Councillor Fisher,
Here.
Councillor Leftridge,
Here.
Councillor Nunnally,
Here.
Councillor Walker,
Here.
Councillor Gabrielle, Mayor Hunter.
Here. We have one item on the work session agenda this evening, the FY 2027 preliminary budget discussion. Mr. Nygren, staff report.
Yeah, Mayor and Council, I appreciate the opportunity to have kind of one last work session before we get to final adoption of the budget in August. As you recall, had some lengthy work sessions back in May going through the entire city budget kind of line by line. Then subsequently had public hearings on the budget, and then the council authorized limited expenditure of FY 27 funds until such time the final budget is adopted in August. But I did kind of, being that there's kind of a lot of new council members as well, kind of going and kind of outlining the process moving forward, so council's aware of that. I just hoping to get to the point where when we do get to final budget discussion and resolutions, it's, a smooth process. Hopefully we could have, I'll go over some of the things that were kind of highlighted during preliminary budget discussions and go over some of the adjustments that we have made. And then certainly if there's any additional additions or subtractions or concerns regarding the budget before we get to final adoption, we could talk about that. So like I said, kind of went to the process to date. The adoption process in August, for those that haven't been through it, is kind of unique. There's going to be a number of resolutions, a lot of them, upwards of 11, that will be before you on August 17th. It'll be anything from resolutions authorizing the budget or the work plans for the Business Improvement District and the T-bid as well, the Tourism Business Improvement District, mill levy and annual appropriation resolutions, and maintenance district. So there's going to be a number of resolutions. So for example, the mill levy one, we'll be having a discussion on that a bit later, but that's kind of really the central component to kind of one of my goals tonight. But there will be a specific resolution into that. And really the mill levies get set as well, going into the Department of Revenue does valuations in early August, and we use that to then create that'll kind of give us what we think our revenue projections will be needed and our mill levies that we'll need in order to meet our budget. So some other things, just general topics that were talked about during the budget were the PIO. So I did not add a PIO into the budget. I certainly have heard the council. I just want to make sure that if we're considering an additional personnel, that we do it the most efficient way. Certainly could add it to the budget. That'll affect that, but just want to make sure that we're utilizing or doing the best use of city resources. There is, I think, the opportunity to do some things, at least in the near term, with city staff, and come to the council with kind of a strategic plan of how that position could work in the city. Some of the directors have had some conversations as well. Just whether it was, there was discussion at that time, a deputy city manager or an assistant city clerk or a PIO officer or a utilization of maybe some other ways to do that. I just want to make sure if we're headed that route, we kind of have done it strategically. So be looking at coming to the council, here in the coming months with how that could work out going into next budget year, as well as kind of unleashing our existing communications manager to do some more things that historically she hasn't done. So I guess if I don't hear anything else in that regard, like I said, you'll be hearing more of it, but I did not put that in the budget for this year. So.
Thank you, Your Honor. Have you done kind of an estimation of what it would be, whether it be a half-time or a full-time position, what that cost would be for a PIO?
Well, that's a good question. I mean, it'll, I guess, depend on how we look at it, but I mean, any FTE in the city is going to be 100 plus,
Okay.
So that's just the direction. I don't foresee it being a part-time position, that's why utilizing some of our existing resources, our existing staff, there may be some things shift around. So it could be an additional half FTE PIO, maybe half position. We got a lot of needs at the city and finding a way to do that. But also knowing that we want to if we're gonna do it, we wanna do it right. And knowing that, you know, efficiency can go too far as well sometimes, so making sure that we just have put a lot of thought into that, and so.
Any other thoughts on that before we move on? Mr. Noble Waterman.
Support the idea that we're looking at what we're going to do. It seems like that there's some other just sort of market studies, but also just how it will be implemented. And it seems like something not to rush to put into the budget now, but definitely to plan for.
Yeah.
So I appreciate that as the approach and looking at.
Yeah. Yeah, obviously having, you know, a new council, it didn't go into the preliminary budget adding a bunch, but that's why the discussions were important, you know, to plant seeds, and I can think about those as we move into the future, and appreciate just giving some time on that one to make sure that we do it the best way. I know enforcement has always been talked about, continues to be talked about. Did not add an enforcement officer per se, but kind of like going back to the PIO discussion, did find a way without adding an FTE to kind of reprioritize some positions between our animal warden position and our existing parking enforcement position, as well as the license plate reader and the efficiencies that come along with that. We do feel like with the LPR, we'll be able to pick up at least a half a FTE, which would allow us to utilize some of that additional time to do some enforcement around town without adding an FTE. So the idea would be that this additional SSO officer, which is really just a title change, would have the ability to do some more enforcement around town, not looking at going and doing a whole bunch of proactive enforcement or anything like that, but certainly the ability to respond to enforcement issues, as well as handle some things as needed, would be able to do that more proactively than we have in the past.
Yeah, I searched the entire document for NARC and I couldn't find it. So that's why I didn't see it in the budget, apparently.
No comment.
I appreciate you doing that. It was something when I was door knocking that came up at multiple locations when I was listening. So appreciate you addressing that. And I hope we get the word out so people know that we have responded to a request. It wasn't just my word either. I had during the town meeting. I also had people coming up asking me about it. So I'd love to get the word out at some point when it's appropriate.
So the idea would be the parking officer would also be the compliance officer?
So
and
we have
the animal resource individual?
So essentially, we have an animal, in the past, we've had an animal warden and the parking enforcement. Those two positions, we'll have two SSOs, kind of the same duties that encompass city code enforcement as well as parking enforcement. So without having the additional FTEs, the LPR, the ability to be more efficient going around town will free up time to go do general enforcement. Those positions are already just driving around, so they'll already be out and about. But they would be able to respond to just general complaints, whether it's parks ordinances, dogs off leash, things like that. Just kind of also expanding the animal warden duties as well, just because we don't get a lot of just general animal warden complaints. It's pretty limited. Not saying that those enforcements is going away, but just in general, that position encompasses those duties anyways, but just kind of expanding the scope of what they would be enforcing on a daily basis.
Okay, thank you.
Appreciate again that strategy of looking at compliance and how we might be able to do that forward. I've been giving some thoughts about compliance and enforcement officer, that they're enforcing the laws that we want, and we're not looking at some of these outdated ones.
Could we do that by the job description?
That would actually just be a council work session and ordinance updates.
Okay.
So those would be things that, whether it's a patrol officer, KPD officer, zoning, there's a whole multitude of things that the council could direct staff. You know, I know the mayor had mentioned previously fireworks, and if there's a way to work on that, you know, so there's a lot of rules in city code. So certainly the ability to look at some of the ordinances and make some changes is always a possibility, you know, if that's the direction the council wants to head.
Could we also prioritize that position though, in terms of what it's working on, or is that not something we would do? Or is that more of a staff?
That would be done at the staff level,
Okay.
but I mean, it's usually would be reflective of complaint basis, but there certainly there are things that are like the lower hanging fruit, for example, that they would be able to focus on.
Okay.
Any other thoughts about that officer position or Mr. Waterman's proposal about tackling kind of cleanup code work session in the future?
So you're thinking, take out some of the codes we already have?
Take out some of the codes
Yeah.
that we already have. I think that was an example of one. I wouldn't necessarily say it has to be a whole, but an initiative to be able to put direction. But if there are some of those that we've already thought are identified before we wanted to,
That's still active. So, it's currently technically in Kalispell, it's illegal for a man to wear a dress on Main Street. Okay? Just stupid stuff like that we can just chuck, right? Nobody knows about it. They do now because I said it, right? But there's
It's not enforced either.
exactly. There's also you can only drive 5 miles an hour on Main Street because it might scare the horses. That's still in our ordinances. We need to just chuck out some of these old ones. So some of these would be just removal. Maybe we just get together, draft, 20 or a list of 20 that we just want to see removed, go over them in the work session. And then the revision ones are going to be a longer discussion probably, but we could have a list of those as well.
I'd like to see you on dresses.
I will note that Ms. Gabriel emailed the committee, the council before the meeting and also supported looking at the rooster ordinance as well, so
Okay.
she's supporting that.
it just seems like, I mean, part of it is like our conversations at council help focus so that there are part of that education and being able to say that we're taking that serious, that we want to have enforcement, but also have some cleanup. If people would be willing to do that, it just seems like within a work session, but then also a way to refine the compliance officer when we're able to want a budget for that.
Yep, that's easy enough to do. We'll just, here in the coming months, as time allows, have some work sessions. I will just caution, oftentimes, these things can grow. So as long as council's aware of that, certainly, but you would have the ability to amend and pull things depending on public comment and all that. There would be a public comment for any ordinance, first reading, second reading. But there certainly is, if there's a desire to do some cleanup, there's definitely the opportunity to do that within our ordinances, so. All right. All right. Anything else on that? So other things we talked about, I believe we talked about the recreation plan. There is going to be some funds allocated towards that within the final budget. We'll be looking at adding to the council salaries, just a consumer price index adjustment. Last time the city council salaries were looked at was 1997, so I do plan on adding just basically CPI to the last salary adjustment for that.
Can we, just pause there? So the rec plan, so it was 20,000 for
Yep.
the feasibility study, is that?
Correct, that's correct.
Okay. All right, and then the council, pay increase. So just for context, we did receive as council an email kind of outlining some different ways that you looked at doing that.
Correct.
And applying the inflation from 1997, when it was last established, council pay, to today, was actually the approach that resulted in the smallest increase for the budget.
Compared to other comparable cities.
Compared to the approach of comparing other cities, which is something we talked about in the past. I would, it is being since 1997, it is, a significant increase. But it is saying that council in 97 felt that was an appropriate pay at that time. So, it would carry through. But I've always proposed say a 3% cap on the cost of living adjustment moving forward to ensure that when we have an experience like we did recently with 7% inflation, that we're not seeing kind of an explosion of that salary. I still support that moving forward, but I'd also apply it retroactively if we adopt this approach so that kind of the most recent big inflation we've experienced, that we're not capturing that. We keep it at 3% to show that, you know, there is some cap to this growth over time. So applying it retroactively and moving forward would be my proposal if we move forward with that proposal.
Well, as far as a process, so I'm planning on putting it in the budget. It will require a resolution by the council that would adopt, so that'd be the time that the council could make those motions. Just in general, not arguing against, but CPI averages, it averages out over time. Certainly the council could put limits. They could not adopt it, but they could put limits up and down if they wanted to. But in general, the CPI over time it averages out those highs and lows, so that would be the easy way. And how we do typically do salaries like that, we'll just tie it to them CPI index moving forward. That way the council wouldn't be put in that position in the future, so.
Ms. Plank?
My question is on the recreation part. Can we?
Yeah.
But I don't want to do it unless you're, are we, okay. So what, as a newbie, do we do if we have suggestions like Jed had suggested that we have a community rec center? I know that's not something for this budget, probably not something for the next budget, but just as a long-term plan, how does one begin that process? If that were something the council really wanted to see happen?
This $20,000 and starting the strategic planning and the planning towards it would be that first step.
So
because that
then
would outline,
we
that
could
would then
advocate for
further
that?
Yeah,
Okay.
that would then further outline the next steps in order to get to that point of ultimate funding and construction and real costs. What's it even going to look like as far as potential costs and where it could be and what the funding mechanisms would be.
And can we
the
look at
demand.
private, public, pardon my interruption. Go ahead, I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
I just wonder if we could look at public-private partnerships for that, or how does that all play out? Is that all part of that study?
It
I
would
guess
be,
Yep,
yes.
okay,
Yeah.
thanks.
Mr. Fisher?
Yeah, Ms. Blank, I certainly don't want to throw away 20,000, knowing that it can never be attainable to get to whatever that cost is. But I think by having something substantial by this council or by the city will bring out those private investors or people who may be interested in seeing our kids and adults have something more to do than what the city currently offers. So I think that, and then looking at other studies too, in an effort not to waste money, because I know the chamber has done some work, County Parks and Rec. So to bring everything together and just combine all that and give us some good information, and the public who may be interested in this. There's been several attempts, they all fail. There's no secret to that. The chamber's study proved that it was difficult for them. But I think this could allow us to bring in additional partners and private donations that could help us get to something good for this community.
Yeah, step one is just to figure out what it would cost today, right? After we get that figure, then we have something to work toward. Right now, we have no idea. It just seems obtainable right this second, because we just don't know how much it's going to be. Sounds like it's going to be astronomical, but we don't know who's going to step forth. You know, a private entity could come forth and say, hey, I want to partner with you on this. We have no idea if they're sitting out there waiting for something like this to happen. And even if not, the community can get together and do whatever they want. They could raise money themselves to help with this. You never know where this is going to go. It's going to kind of depend on demand, who wants it, right? And I think there's a lot more that want it than we think. And hopefully after we get this figure and study out there, that'll bring some of those guys out of the woodwork.
I think the element we've been missing is demonstrating that the city is serious about this. I think that there have been a lot of efforts around the community and people wanting to chat with each other and wanting to move it forward, but without the behemoth that is the city of Kalispell and the weight that we carry and the funding mechanisms that we can bring to the table, those efforts just have fizzled out. So I think that the opportunity for us to help lead the conversation and bring a lot of those pieces to the table is essential. So I think to Sid's point, we don't want to redo what the chamber's done. There's already a lot of good work out there, but let's bring everybody to the table, similar to what we're doing with the housing committee, right? Let's bring everybody to the table, have the city help support that effort, and figure out what's possible in our community.
Mr. Miller?
I guess I'll just say it here at this point. I think a rec study is a good thing to do. I think the PIO is a good thing to do. I think what we're doing with the special services officers. But when it comes down to how to fund it, I certainly would rather not take a raise for the council as a whole and be able to use that funding towards those or to employees or however we can improve the city. So just my 2 cents.
For what it's worth, Councilman Nunley, I figured out a way after after I found out that I was getting paid to donate back to the Parks and Rec Scholarship Fund. And so if I can very much appreciate that if there are individuals that do need the pay raise, and it entices more people to run for these positions and to be leaders in the community, great. If it's not necessary, there are mechanisms in order to put it back into the city, whether it's for Jed's Gym, whether it's for the scholarship program. There's a lot of great things that the city does, and it took a little while to figure it out, so happy to share that with anybody about how to do that.
Well, and I thank you for that. I think before we get to that point, my concern more is the folks that are paying the taxes, right, in the long run. And when we start having these little runaway things here and there, they all add up, right? Every dollar adds up. My grandmother who just passed away, those dollars added up quick, right? And to then say, oh, well, you can donate it, that's a little bit of the wrong attitude that I take towards that, because it's everyone's prerogative to make a donation where they want and for what they want. And everyone can figure out that. But when it comes right down to it, what I'm saying is before we even get to the point of having to make a donation, that's where I have that problem, right? So that's my only thing.
And just as far as process, once again, so I'll put the numbers in the final budget, which have been there in the past, but in order to do it, it also will require resolution to be approved by council, so, you could take that stance and still approve the final, but I'm not telling you how to vote one way or another, but the final budget, it's one line out of
Correct.
thousands of them. But certainly it will require resolution by council to do it as well, so that would be an opportunity for your comment.
The problem with that though is it's bundled with a whole bunch of other stuff, right? So
Yep.
if I don't like it and I'm really
Yep.
resistant to it, like I am, I have to vote against that resolution for that piece of the budget. And then technically, when the entire budget comes up for a vote, I have to vote against it as well, because it's in there, right? I can't say, I want all of the budget except for this piece, right?
Or you could do a motion to amend it out. That's what's
Exactly.
happened in the past. So-
All right, so I understand it. It's not as easy as it sounds, because you're approving a whole bunch of other stuff with that one line item.
Yeah.
I do understand that it does come up again, and it'd be our time to talk about it again in an actual council meeting. But it does have I think there's appetite up on the council here to go forward with this, with a few exceptions. But, I'd hate to have our budget barely pass because of something like that. I'm just throwing that out there.
All right. So other updates, gas, as you know, with things that are going on internationally, gas has peaked, kind of come down, and now is peaking again. So we did make adjustments kind of across the board for gas budget. As we started this in May, the war wasn't really happening, and then as we went on, it looked like it was going to affect our budget moving forward. So we did make adjustments on that. We've made a couple updates with our IT and some of our services that kind of go into some of our departments. So there was a slight increase in our IT budget for some various departments throughout the city. Kind of one of the bigger things that I want to talk about, and I mentioned it a couple council meetings ago, but we did apply for a SAFER grant. The SAFER grant is for fire staffing, and the staffing would be for the fire station that's currently being designed and would be constructed here in a couple years. If we were lucky enough to be awarded the staffing for that, which we did do some contingent money for upfitting those firefighters. So the bunking gear and physicals and uniforms and all that type that we would have to do for that as well if we were to get it. That would be levy funded. We do have the funds to do that. But once again, the SAFER grant, we budgeted for 2 firefighters, additional firefighters in FY '27. We could get, with basically the same cost, 8 through the SAFER grant, because city would be paying for 25% and the SAFER grant would pay for 75%, but we would need to upfit those firefighters. So did add some contingency funds within the levy for that particular situation.
And may I ask a question from
Yeah.
that? So then how long does that grant last? So at some point, we'll have to pick it up for the general fund, I assume?
No, those would actually
Are they
be
permanent?
picked up by the levy about the time the fire station would be done.
Oh, so that's
So
how we're,
perfect
I see, that's
timing,
what you
yes.
meant by that. Okay, just checking, thanks. Again, my newness.
Yep. Well, that's why we're here. So yeah, that fire station will be fully staffed with 15 firefighters. But the way the emergency responder levy funding is, you can't really build a fire station and have salaries at the same time. This would give us the ability to do that. So fingers crossed.
We talked about this at a work session, but haven't heard anything formal yet. For the fire station build out, when they're doing the design, I think we all semi-agreed at least that we wanted to see an option in there for what the baby box installation would cost. I'd like that to be an optional piece so we can actually see the price that the installation is going to cost. So the baby box itself, we'll probably get a grant for the actual piece of equipment, right? The installation, much more expensive. I want to know what that number is. And I won't know what that number is until it gets designed as an option in our fire station layout. Is that something that we all agreed to do? Is that going to happen? Where do we sit on that?
So that was actually my next kind of point.
All right, segue.
So, in general, this was not something that staff proposed to council. It's come up during public comment. There is a grant through Department of Health for up to 20,000. Our estimates are well above 20,000 to pay for one of these, not to account for long-term maintenance and long-term costs and liability to the city for having one of these. We have reached out to our insurance provider, MMIA, and although state law hypothetically kind of exempts us from everything, it doesn't. We do have concerns with long-term heat not working, cameras not working. There's a lot that goes into it. We'll just put it that way. So certainly we have talked to our consultants and they are looking at an option that would be like an ad alternate that council could consider for a baby box. But really not having a lot of partners coming to the table at this point either, which we usually do, we would propose certainly developing a policy around this. I would say state law does protect mothers in this regard. So if a mother was to, which they can now, whether it's an emergency room or a fire station, developing a policy around if one were to be dropped off, kind of the continuum of care that would go along with that. Once again, I haven't added anything to the budget. Council could certainly do that. But I will say the cost will likely exceed the $20,000 grant the city would be eligible for, so.
No, that's completely understood. I think the box itself is like 20 grand, right? Without pre-installation, right?
Yeah, and maintenance and
So
tech.
I just want to know what that number is, because if we know what the number is, then just like the fitness place, right? Or the, what do you call
Rec
it?
center.
Jed's Gym. So just like Jed's Gym, we want to know what the price is, because without knowing what we have to attain, people are going to be really reluctant to come out of the woodwork to support it, right? We just need to have it based in reality. And if it's an option to the fire station, I don't think the design is going to really cost, thousands and thousands of dollars just to get that option in there. I just want to see what that number is because without that number, I don't think anything's gonna be successful. So we just need to know how much it's gonna cost. And it would also be good to kind of actually also figure out what the ongoing surveillance and maintenance cost is gonna be for it as well. I have a sneaking suspicion that there are private entities out there that would support this, and we could get a private-public thing going with this as well. But like just like with the gym, I don't know if anybody's going to support it if it's just like some kind of ethereal thing out there. We need a number. This is what it's going to cost us. People, do you want it or not? So. Can we get it into the plan as an option?
Yes.
That's
So
all
it'll be-
I'm asking for. I'm not
yes.
asking for anything
So
else.
we've already got them, they're designing it, they can add an ad alternate. If the council wanted to choose at a time of bid award, they would be able to do that.
Do we also want to double down on this and say, put the escape room in there as well? I don't know what
We
it would
haven't,
call
we
it.
haven't gone that far, no.
Okay, I'm just wondering where we want to go with it as a council. I'm satisfied right now. I don't need to go any further. But if somebody wanted the safe room for people to go into if they're evading domestic violence or whatever, so that kind of sounds like these two things fit in that same bucket.
I'll address that point in a minute, but Ms. Blank,
I actually didn't know we had agreed that we were going to move in that direction, and I've done a lot of research on this, and I have learned a couple things. One, as you said, already you can drop off at any time. So the process hasn't been defined, but the opportunity is there. The problem with the baby boxes that I have learned about, nothing is available to the mother. And there are lots of things that have gone awry as a result of that. And I have a letter that was written by probably 20 pediatricians to the NIH board saying, please do not do baby boxes, because the real solution to this is unconditional birth in their local hospitals. So I don't feel like we've researched this enough to truly understand what is the problem we're trying to solve. And if the problem is having a place for a mother to drop off a baby, we already have that solved. We just don't have a process for it. If the problem is trying to find a place that's safe for the baby and the mother, then it would mean talking to Logan Health or whatever facilities and talking about unconditional birth so that I can go if I were to have a baby. And at that point in time, I could relinquish that child, but also be in a place where I could get the medical care I might need to continue on. So there's I personally, and as the only woman on the council at this very moment, I might bring a different perspective, and I recognize that, but I don't want to ignore that there are needs for the mother that are important as well, and I don't think the baby box is thinking about that necessarily. And a lot of people have commented on this in the research that I've been reading.
So our consultants have looked into it quite a bit, and it's roughly 140,000 to do a baby box, if that answers your question.
I kind of figured it was a number like that, but
So that would be the number if council wanted to move forward with it. If we went out to bid to put it in. I don't have that answer. Yeah.
I guess the other question would be, in the fire stations, could they do something else with that money that might be more likely to save lives? It's a lot of money, and as a steward of the budget, I also want us to be thinking about, is that what they would choose to serve us as a community? Because if you look at the data, how many babies have been dropped off? What's the number versus how many people get a very long service call because they're too far away or whatever? It's a lot of money that could go to some other. And having been in an accident, not being able to get an emergency medical response because triage was committed and I wasn't. So just a good Samaritan took me in, right? They got the fire truck, the person who didn't wear the seatbelt. So I'm also thinking I'd love to see this money go towards the wider community, given that the data just doesn't suggest we need this right now for the costs.
Mr. Waterman.
I'm where Councilperson Blank is on this. I mean, to me, it's like there's a need for the policy and an investment in the continuum of care. Because again, I think my larger thing is, and I've been thinking about the same issue. It's like we've been hearing about the public comment for the city, but there's fire halls in the county as well, and the investment in, again, just being a predominantly rural setting, I think there's a better use of what type of investment there is, but also because the safeguards are already there from the statute, from the mother forfeiting a child, which not all states have. I mean, I think that that's the unique thing in Montana, that that's now state law. But again, the other spaces that have been discussed that this is happening in Montana is Billings and Missoula, which are much larger cities and have a much more robust continuum of care.
So before we get hung up on
Yeah.
government budget items here, I'm suggesting that just having this number be known and have it as an option to the fire station may have, it may be covered completely outside of our budget. That's where I'm kind of going with this. So I'm not asking that we go forward and purchase one and put 140,000 into our budget for it. I'm saying let's just get the number and then see what happens. And you know, Jed and his gym is he wants the same thing. He wants
Well,
he
I would
he
say,
wants to
so
know he wants to
that's,
know the number, right?
that's why it's good that we're having a work session and we're publicly stating as part of our new fire station, it's gonna be about $140,000 to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's great. I mean, with that being public knowledge, we'll just see where the chips land, right?
I would just like to kind of add some thoughts, because I also looked into it quite a bit. And, you know, to start, the data, I agree. We don't have any data that there's ever been an abandoned baby exposed to the elements in Kalispell, ever. Nobody's presented that data. So I challenge, you know, the need for it, number one. But I also, from what I looked into, there could be an actual harm in doing this. It's not just a matter of the cost, and even if we had the cost 100% covered, that, as I understand it, one of the big factors of why babies are abandoned can be something as simple as the cost of raising a child, the cost of getting the diapers, getting the food, having a car seat, and that if you actually have a handoff to a nurse or a firefighter, and they say, hey, you know, how we do this, you know, you're free to do this, but why are you doing this? And they say, well, I can't afford the food. Oh, well, we can figure out something for you to work that out, right? And then you have a situation where you don't have an abandoned baby. But if you provide the option of abandoning the baby without that contact, then you're in a kind of a worse situation. And not only that, but I understand that one of the really important things for an abandoned baby is understanding the health context that the baby is in. In other words, was this baby born addicted to drugs? Do they have fetal alcohol syndrome? Nurses need to know that. Genetic history. And that's why that contact, that handoff is so important. And also, I did read an article that there was kind of a similar push. So this is a push that's happening kind of nationwide right now by interested parties. And a similar push was made in Germany 25 years ago in the 2000s. And they implemented a lot of baby boxes across Germany. And from what I reviewed, the statistics said that there was no statistical difference in abandoned babies in Germany from pre-implementation to post-implementation. So again, the data doesn't support that this actually works. So I'd say we don't have data that we need it. We don't have data that works. And we have a reasonable suspicion that could actually do some harm. So you add to that the fact that there's fairly hefty cost and that there's an ongoing maintenance cost. I'm not seeing the arguments for me to be supportive. on the issue of the kind of domestic violence safe room, I did reach out to the Abbey Shelter director and say, is this something you would like to see in the community for domestic violence victims? And I don't want to put too much word in her mouth, but it sounds like they have some expansion plans where they may address this need in the community anyways, but also that know that that's not, like if they prioritize things, this would not be a priority for them. I would encourage folks to reach out to them to get their specific viewpoint. That was my interpretation of what I heard, so I want to be careful there. But so I would also, even if we did the baby box, I would not add the cost of the safe room for domestic violence, because we're not having anybody ask for that in the community, from what I understand.
So basically you're saying, no, we don't want to find out how much this costs in reality.
We know, we have the cost,
We have
$140,000.
a round number. Is that in, I mean, did somebody research that? Is that from this year? I mean, everything went up like 200% over, from 2025 till now. Is that still an accurate number?
Yes, it's our current number with our design team that's working on the fire station now.
Okay, well, I'll just put that out there and let it be known.
And I would just echo that, yes, having the number is important, so I appreciate having that number, that you were able to provide that tonight. Because, yeah, it is important to have that number just before we start chopping things and saying no, right? To have that number of how much it is, so, thank you.
Mr. Fisher.
I too want to see the number, but that will not include long-term M&O.
Correct.
It would not.
Okay.
So,
I have a little different comment here. I read where these boxes have saved 87 children. And no amount of money, I mean, we all would agree, if we could save one life, 140,000. But I generally understand as government with people's money where many of you are feeling. I have a little bit of a problem with the process. This gentleman's so committed, coming in here time after time again. I almost want to, when we visit about some of these other policies, have something to where a private group has already done their work. I think that's what you're looking for. Somebody now magically to come up with X amount of money. I want to see a process more like, there's many things that the community could use for public safety. Come with a process of, we've got this group together, we're bringing some money to the table, and long-term maintenance or M&O or a trust fund to take care of said thing. I mean, it could be something as simple as fall zones and a playground equipment. You read studies about this, and thousands of children are hurt because the fall zone isn't a good 4 or 6 inches, and they fall and break their neck, or terrible injuries that affect them for life. When I ran County Parks and Recreation, specifically with Big Fork, which we had trouble budgeting for, and you see that now with the county with Big Fork and Slider, the group got together down there, started a foundation, raised some money to help, and this is totally different. Don't anybody think I'm comparing a fall zone to a life, because that's immeasurable. But I want a process to where people realize that we're not just this pot of money. It's pretty tight budget when you really get down to it. 18, 20% carryover. It's not like we're loaded with funds to hand out to people, is understanding number one. Understanding number two is you have to help us help you. If there's something that you're so committed to, we have to have more options on the table right from the get-go, in my humble opinion.
and I'd say if that opportunity comes here in the next weeks or months or year, then I'll certainly keep the council apprised, because certainly now that it's public and the cost, and, if there's the opportunity to have some sort of partnership, I'll certainly make sure I keep the council apprised of that.
Thank you.
All right, so now kind of the big topic of of tonight's conversation, is kind of cash carryover at the city and what to do with that. And I feel like it's an important conversation, given kind of the history of Kalispell and knowing, we have a lot of new council members and what they want to do, and like how this can affect the city moving forward. And it is an important conversation, but And it's really about deciding whether to mill the full amount authorized under state law or not. Typically, in past budget cycles, the Kalispell City Council has adopted levies. It's gone up and down. Last year was only 1 mill, but roughly 10 mills less than the authorized cap to provide localized tax relief. And given the amount of, we currently have budgeted about 480,000. That's what we had budgeted, but it's likely going to be quite a bit higher than that. Likely, I don't want to put out an exact number, but I know it's going to be a lot higher than 480,000. That doesn't mean we don't have the demands or the needs. Typically, cash carryovers in regards to vacancy savings throughout the city. Like I said, our budget still needs those positions, but when somebody retires or leaves or moves on, often it takes time to replace those individuals, can take upwards of 6 months to do that. So just in general, throughout citywide, with roughly 250 employees, we have cash carryover. So with that, knowing that we have a lot of capital needs, last year the city did only carry or put in the cupboard 1 mill. We put 600,000 into capital for the central garage. That's not something we've done every year in years past, but it just shows the needs we have. We have the Parks Master Plan coming up. There's going to be a lot of capital needs in that. A lot of playground equipment that needs replaced. We have playground equipment that's being held together with plywood. I don't think that that's reflective of the city and our priorities. So I say this knowing that we've budgeted this. It was in last year's budget. It's carryover. The question is, moving forward, does the council want to carry mills forward or not? And I kind of have some stats here. In general, the argument for not milling the full amount is recent state-level property tax shifts and rising market values have heavily impacted Flathead County, as we all know. And it's actually not just Flathead County, it's the entire state, leaving local commercial and residential property owners facing immense tax hikes. All true. Foregoing full millage prevents accelerating this community strain. So that's certainly a reason to not mill the full amount. Kalispell has historically cushioned its general fund through alternative revenue sources such as voter-approved special levies. So the issue is, if you strangle yourself and don't mill the full amount all the time, that compounds over the time, necessitating doing a levy. The question is, if you're milling appropriately all the time, will you need to do a levy? Levies going out to the voter is a very hard thing to do. I know this is a tough conversation, but as we start to move forward into budget discussions and future budgets, the need for a 4th fire station, things like that, knowing that going out to the voters for another levy is going to be really difficult to do. Another reason for not milling, we do bank unused mill levies. So if, say, we put 10 mills in the cupboard, you can use those the next year. However, history shows you usually bank again. That compounds over time. I would just say, as like a school project, go look at. It's very interesting when you look at our general fund budget versus other cities in the state, and you see kind of how far we are behind, and it's shows why it's so difficult for us to even add an FTE, add fire, add police. We absolutely needed the emergency responder levy, but, could go back in time, like, have we strangled ourselves too much and not kept up? Our budget is half the rate of inflation. So if you go half the rate of inflation and then also mill less, that compounds over time, right? So the arguments for milling, Kalispell's building permits hit a record 250 million, bringing thousands of new housing units to the area. Maxing out mills would secure the reoccurring baseline revenue needed to sustain long-term city services. As we know, Councilman Dowd mentioned, we learned with the levy, growth doesn't always pay for growth, but it certainly won't if you're not milling the max. Rising operational inflation, municipal levy caps are tied directly to trailing 3-year average inflation rates. Failing to collect the full inflationary adjustment can cause municipal spending power to permanently fall behind. We've seen that. Preserving future capacity, milling below the maximum cap can artificially depress city's future property tax revenue baseline if unexpected inflation or state valuation cuts occur, which we've seen, and we're going to continue to see that at the state level. Any mills the city chooses not to leverage are banked. While this protects current residents, compounding municipal needs eventually force cities to reclaim these banked mills during future fiscal crunches. Emergency responder levy. So I did my own house down in South Meadows, value $411,000. The value of a single mill on the tax bill is $3.16. So that's for $411,000. I'm just doing my house. This is not a commercial property, which is going to be more. If your house is valued higher, it'll be a little bit more. If it's lower, it'll be a little bit less. So essentially, actually, I can break this down further for you. Based off a new state law, you remember your property tax was 1.35%. It's now down to 0.76%. We have a highly single-family city, which is going to make this even more difficult for the city moving forward. That's the reason I want to have this conversation as well. But so the first 400,000 is at 0.76, which means on my house I have a $3,040 in taxable value. The remaining 11,000, the house is valued at 11,000, is now 1.1%, which is still below 1.35, is $121. So my total taxable value is $3,161, which is $1 of tax for every $1,000 of taxable value. My specific value is calculated as $3,161 divided by 1,000, which is $3.16 per mill. So 10 mills, roughly, our average is $31. So the question is, or if you have a $300,000 house, it'd be $2.28. 400,000 is $3.04. 550,000, which is the median house in Kalispell, is $4.69. And 800,000 is $7.44. Commercials would be higher than that.
So that's 7,000, whatever, that's per $1,000 that your house is worth. Is that what you're saying?
No, it's total.
No,
That's total, that's the total increase?
no. So that's per mill,
Yeah,
$7 per mill. So if 10 mills, $70.
gotcha.
My house, $30, $31.60. So by putting 10 mills in the cupboard, you save me $31. Question is that $31 savings, which is real, worth sacrificing some of the capital needs the city of Kalispell has that are continuing to escalate moving forward? For example, even going into this year, we cut a $350,000 chiller out of our public safety budget. Do we utilize the cash carryover to do that, to pay for that? Or do we just push that off further and further and further? So really the question is, going into final budget, it can also be split. There's likely gonna be some mills that can be put in the cupboard, which has been kind of past practice. Or do we want to focus on setting, say, a capital fund aside that would still require a budget amendment for council to expend those funds? It wouldn't just be a fund for anything. It would go into a fund that would require a budget amendment to do any expenditures out of it. Or it could be designated towards specific things, like the chiller going into this year's budget, which I have not put in this year's budget, or start planning for that next big capital need, like a fire station, for example. Which is going to be a need as we see all the growth in North Kalispell. It's already in our CPSM report. It's, but come 7-8 years from now, we're not going to have the ability to go ask for more. And whether or not, if we have the ability to save, if we should be doing that. And that's something that I would like to start in this year's budget, so.
Explain.
So just out of curiosity, your rationale makes good sense to me. If we do this, and then the state is under several court cases, right? They're being,
Legislation coming up.
yeah,
So, once again, legislation coming up.
yeah.
So, once again, the narrative out there is city, if you look at the city general fund, it is right, it's 2.5%. I mean, you just look,
Yeah.
it can only go up so much.
No, it totally
The
makes
stat-
sense to me. I just wonder if we can if we can turn the clock back, if we have to, if it just becomes too onerous for people because of, I don't know what the next version is going to be, right, from the state. So I just have a little anxiety, that's all.
I think, just correct me if I'm wrong, but I think ultimately what we're trying to decide is the approach, because the numbers may change various factors, but the approach won't. Like, we might have a lot of money that we can put in reserve, or we might have very little or nothing, depending on how things go. The question is, if we have something, what are we doing with that something? Whatever that amount is.
So there is flexibility.
There,
No.
yes, it's just kind of a standard approach, and it's going to deal with the reality of whatever that reality is at the time that, the money's coming in, right?
So Jared, if we put some mills in the cupboard, we can't use that money until the next budget cycle, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Well,
And then remind you that then affects the next year's budget, because you're constantly just shoving it down. Especially if you don't use those in the cupboard the following year.
Mr. Nolan.
you're just, okay, so I don't understand that piece. So we
So
have
if
money
you
in the
put,
bank.
if you put 10 mills in a cupboard,
Uh-huh.
and then the next year you do another 10 mills and don't add those 10 mills back in, you pretty much just eliminated 10 mills from your budget forever.
Oh, no,
If you don't put them back in the next year, which we typically don't, they're gone forever. You have 1 year to put them back. So if you don't say we don't do 10 this year, if you don't add them back in next year, so then you'd actually be going above the cap. You'd have to go to your cap and above. Then they're gone forever.
Mr. Nolan.
Thank you, Your Honor. Yeah, thank you, Your Honor. I know here not too long ago, the DOR said that they were behind on property tax on net new. Have you heard, are they catching up, or how far behind are we on realizing net new?
I don't really want to speak for them.
Okay.
I saw it as well statewide. There was $1 billion being thrown around. In the city of Kalispell, I think they're not as far off as you would think.
Okay.
Although I will say it does still take time. If a project gets finished late January, it usually doesn't hit all the way till the following year. So there is a lag. And there's just still some unknowns as well with the budget, as all municipalities are facing with just the shift. And because growth also got limited, it's now inflation up to 4%. But we don't get as much growth. So even though we're having growth, we're not going to capture all of that, because that has now been limited as well. So just out of sake of caution, not knowing exactly where things are going to lie, I just feel like it's a council discussion. Like I said, we have a lot of capital needs. We're going to be talking about them here on July 27th with the Parks and Recreation Plan. And there is the ability typically to at least utilize some of those funds towards some capital projects that otherwise, like I said, this is already budgeted money. It just didn't get spent, so.
I guess just to have a couple more follow-up if I can. Where are our reserves sitting at today?
21.3, and that was estimating 480,000 of cash carryover, which is likely half of what we're gonna have.
But I'm trying to remember how far below our cap is on that. We are.
30% is,
We're at 30%. Yeah, that's
no, you can by state law.
correct. Go to 30. That's what I was thinking. So we're 9% low on that. You could have more in reserves, which is the rainy day fund, kind of that insurance fund, right? So I guess my philosophy, I'm just going to point it out there right now, is I like that happy medium of recognizing and putting things in the cupboard, but I also don't want to do that at the detriment of safety or our staff in their work environment. So I think if we have things that we need to be addressing from safety or work environment, I think we should be trying to find ways to do that and still try to be a little bit below that cap, right? So if you're saying we need a new HVAC system, I think absolutely we should be figuring out how to get that in there. Because I'm very familiar with what it is when you have deferred maintenance over a period of time. Pretty soon, you're so far behind, it's going to take you a ton to get caught back up. So I want to balance that, would be my philosophy anyway on that.
Mr. Fisher?
Thank you, Your Honor. I agree with Sam on safety issues for employees, but there's always that emergency that comes up too, that nobody has budgeted for and insurance may not cover it. And you have to be able to deal with that well, or that thing that has to be paid for that is not budgeted for. And then I kind of date myself here in saying I go back to I-105 back in the 80s, where all mills were froze at that level, and the mosquito district here couldn't get it lowered their levy, which was like $1.76 to 17 cents, and that's what they were strapped at until ultimately they had to go beg into the public for a bond to have a mosquito district because the public outcry was enormous. Governments typically tend to slip behind if they don't have a method to have something for those safety issues to make damn sure our employees are taken care of, and or the emergency that comes up that Jared didn't have the foresight or his managers to plan for. I'll take, for example, the roof on the mansion became a big deal. Is it city responsibility? Is insurance going to cover it? The public needs that. You can't let the building go to heck. I think we even stepped in for a little while. There's always those things with the well, a line, something that's not budgeted for. These guys do an amazing job in their long-term planning, but lo and behold, just like in your own home, there's going to be something that comes up. So I'm a fan from long-time experience trying to run a budget of banking some and responsible oversight of that, which we always do. So that will be where I land on that.
Mr. Dowd?
Yeah, so going back to your explanation of like the mill, right, and what that means, everything that you gave us was from the aspect of a homeowner. Thanks to our inept legislature and governor, we now have commercial businesses in blue-collar areas that were hit really hard, which includes Kalispell, places like Kalispell, Butte, Great Falls, Billings. They got hit really hard on the commercial side. And it doesn't really tug at people's heartstrings until you remember that that homeowner that got the tax cut works for these places. They're now reducing their staff because their taxes went up like a huge jump this last year. So us, taking the full mill amount, sure, it's not a huge impact to the homeowners, but it is a bigger impact. I mean, the price that a commercial entity pays is much greater. So we're kind of just compounding that if we increase the mills that we're doing. Now, I do understand last year, and this was totally, we just had to do it. We only banked one mill, right? And we kind of compromised on doing that even because we had been doing like 10 under for years, giving people the tax break. But I'd like to at least see that, and I'd like to double. I mean, can we do 2 mills under? And the reason that I'm kind of going that way is until this thing gets ironed out in court, which I think it is going to be, I think they're going to be successful eventually in the court cases. We'll see, in overturning this because of the impact that it's had on specific regions. Like, it affected us big time here in Kalispell. Almost had no effect in Whitefish, because most of their properties are well over $400,000 for the houses. But in Kalispell, it made a big impact. People got a little bit of a tax break, but the commercial areas got hit hard. And these are the entities that build our economy. They're the entities that hire these people that got the tax cut in their home, right? And if they lose their job, yay, my tax cut, now I got no income. So I'm trying to balance that. What is your proposal on the number of mills that we levy or not?
I don't have that answer till I get the valuations from Department of Revenue early August.
Okay.
But but that's what we're having a discussion.
We're having
I'm trying to get a feeling of,
discussion right now. I
yeah,
understand.
I hear that, there's maybe some middle ground on not going, turning all the mills back, but maybe turning some back to the taxpayer while making sure we're maintaining at least a minimum amount of capital needs. But,
Well, the other problem that happened last year, not only did we had to tax more mills because the value of the mill actually went down, which is pretty
Significantly,
unusual,
yep.
right? So that is an effect of something else the legislature did, but that really hurt cities like big time.
yes,
So anyway,
yes. But we did
No,
put
no.
600,000 to the central garage,
yeah.
which,
I'm
and then
not-
still left, yeah.
I'm actually done now. I don't want to take up more time because I got a little timer here. But, I just don't want people to think only from the homeowner's aspect. You got to think about the commercial industry, which actually creates our local economy.
Mr. Leffridge.
Thank you, Your Honor. Just in general, I'm very in favor of investing in our community. There is deferred maintenance all over, right? I mean, the front of the police station has paint peeling off of it. We're missing curbs downtown. Nothing's been painted. There's potholes. There's plywood in local parks where a slide used to be. Not complaining. I'm just saying that I think that if we have the opportunity to make money aside in order to do deferred maintenance, I believe the people of Kalispell are interested in seeing their tax dollars be invested in their community, in the community that they're very proud of. I think that the schools are a really good opportunity to look at what happens when we underinvest in them, right? Legislature doesn't fund schools at 100%. Then if we don't pass a levy in the community because we're in a dire situation, then we lay off teachers, we lay off things, we take away programs. We almost lost the VOAG Center if it wasn't for the community coming out after 18 years of not passing a levy. And I hate for the city to be in a position when we don't have to be to do that. If we didn't pass the emergency responder levy, if we don't pass another levy in order to fund a new fire station, then where are we at? We're underserving our community. I'm very cognizant of the downtown businesses. My rent's going up for my office. I understand, I talked to the Chamber of Commerce folks, and, Gabe has to sell that many more kegs of beer in order to pay his, in order to pay his taxes. And that is a huge concern and something that we absolutely need to be cognizant of. So those two things weigh against each other. But again, we need to invest in our community.
Mr. Waddon.
Yeah, I'm in agreement that there's investments that I believe we need to do, so setting it aside for whether it's for safety needs or, like we sort of say, within the Parks and Rec plan, there's other things that are gonna be there that we're talking about that do need to be funded and how to keep us forward. Getting to the other issue about commercial property tax, I do think that when it comes down to those conversations, that's why we have to mobilize the TIFs, because there has been this increased burden. And if that money isn't going to pipes in the ground in downtown or in the west side, I think that that's also just sort of an urgent, but when it comes down to this, I think that not putting it in the mills away and putting them into the shelf, be able to keep us active because we know we have those costs. And having been in these conversations before, when we get into the water rate studies, I don't want to then end up deferring it into rates increases. So if we have the money now, which has been tax money, I'd rather put it aside in the surplus and be able to utilize it to also be able to address some of those public safety issues or other issues that we could be able to address with that fund.
Thank you, Your Honor. Can we use these mills for enterprise funds? I didn't think so. Okay, so we wouldn't be able to use them for rates,
Right.
impact rates, and I think we've done a wonderful job in the city of our plans, right? We've got the stormwater and public works, there's the parks, sorry.
I think we've done a good job with our plans, right? Parks, public works, all of those. What about those things like the HVAC in the building that doesn't necessarily fit within a plan? do we have a list of those deferred maintenance items? The paint chips peeling, right? Everything that it would be. Not that we're gonna fund it, but at least so that council, we kind of know how to balance that mills being put away and that we're doing the appropriate ones, but still addressing those items.
So yeah, we've got that in our 5-year capital plan. For example, the $350,000 chiller is in that. The question is though, when you're in preliminary budget, as you know, our expenditures are over revenues going into the budget, roughly 500,000. So there's really, you can't go into preliminary budget really adding anymore. You don't want to guess, you know. The reality is it comes through vacancy savings and things like this, or just non-spending, and so you've budgeted it, it just didn't get spent. The question then is, we could have used that money, we could have planned for capital and things, but you know, you don't really know that until the end of the year, right? And then the question is, when you do have it at the end of the year, well, you've already budgeted, it just maybe wasn't budgeted for that thing, it was budgeted for salaries and such. Do we just, you know, put that in the cupboard? Or do we say we've got enough needs that we don't do that? And we put it towards a playground that is deferred maintenance, that we tried to, you know, because we are putting it a lot of capital into our parks and things, but, you know, the reality is it's not usually enough. So we do know what we need, but then it's, can we fund it at that particular time? And, you know, you're kind of picking and choosing what you could fit within the preliminary budget.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, for my part, I also support, you know, putting aside the money for things we need to do, whether it's capital projects, deferred maintenance, also infrastructure. You know, I've been talking a long time about YNC sidewalks and traffic calming. We get those requests all the time, and we have nothing in the budget for it. Have, you know, a reserve where we could say, you know what, we got that request, you know, we got somebody highlighting a concern on Whitefish Stage. We have some money here, let's, you know, it could cover it, let's put it towards that, we could allocate that. I think on a big ticket item like the fire station, future fire station, you know, having that estimate, how much is that gonna cost? How much are we likely to get from federal or state grants or whatever? And how much are we gonna have to get, you know, put forward to it? How much do we need to put away each year until we have enough for when we expect that fire station to come due of when we need to build it. So then, you know, we know this is the amount we're gonna put towards that, and then this is what we have left over for these other things. Playground equipment, sidewalks, different things. But I also like the idea, you know, even though it's not much, having 1 mil below the cap, just to be able to kind of show the community, we're not capping it. You know, it doesn't amount to a lot for folks, but I think just, you know, to send that message, we're not gonna be at full cap. You know, that would be my approach on it.
We might be forced to go to full cap. We don't know what the mill's gonna come out as,
Correct.
right?
Sure, if we have to.
yeah.
But if we have the opportunity to just be one below, just to send that message to the community, I think it's worthwhile.
Can I talk you into 2? We can afford anything. I mean, the most responsible thing that we can do with people's money is not take it in the first place.
That's right.
Seriously. Let them decide what to do with that money.
Well, the flip side to that is,
I'll take
if
it
you don't
later.
maintain your water, so you can't, this is not a water and sewer discussion, but it's the same thing when we talk enterprise funds. If you don't maintain your water and sewer, it's gonna cost you a lot more in the long run. It's the same idea that I'm presenting here. If you don't do your parks and your playground equipment and all that, when you have the ability to do it, or possibly have the ability to, it's only gonna get more expensive tomorrow. And that's kind of the argument here is, you know, certainly it is worthy to leave mills in the cupboard and tax less, but the demand is gonna be there, and you're gonna hear from it when that piece of playground equipment also has not been repaired, and then where's your tax dollars going? I'm paying this, and you can't fix a piece of playground equipment, even though you had already budgeted it for the year before, you know what I mean? So that's kind of, just the reality is it's gonna come at you either way, and just as far as, you know, having council direction as far as when we do get to final budget, if we have the ability to allocate some funds somewhere, just knowing, I just didn't want to get into final budget having this discussion. I wanted to have an idea of where council was, so that when we get to final budget and we do the levies and the appropriations, I have an idea of where council's gonna want that to go, so.
Ms. Blank.
So I think after having heard all this, thank you. I'm in support. It makes sense. And then the only thing I would suggest is that I know we don't have more information and communications in the budget either, but it would be helpful, I think, to communicate how we're prioritizing and how that money will be spent so people can connect the two dots and see why we're doing it. And maybe we already have that in the plan, but that seems the only thing I would add. And thanks for bringing it up.
Thank you for bringing up the communication part. Because I think that is a real critical thing that I think I've noticed and recognized from my time on council, is it never fails, we get down to budget time, and it's, you know, what sells ink and paper is the big number. But if you really break down what that big number means, it's not the full picture, right? So I think if ink and paper and radio waves and TV waves need to be sold, I think we need to do a really strong job on our website and getting our message out there that this is how that breaks down on that big number.
Well, could we actually do that for a second, just for my own knowledge? I mean, again, I'm kind of new to this whole budget thing, but the headline that we always see is $189 million. But my understanding is, as we're talking about these mills, it's primarily for the general fund budget. Is that right? And
That's correct.
And so the general fund budget is $17 million, and that's what's coming from property taxes.
Not even the full 17. Taxes is 9.
Well, the budget's 17.
The budget's 7, but the general property tax is 9. That includes, we get a, you know, state allocation. For example, it's a, sorry, I'm blanking out. What's it called?
The entitlement?
Yes, the entitlement is all built into that. Fees, fines, forfeiture, like we've got a lot that goes into that 17 million, but the property tax is what?
9 million.
9.1 million.
So we get 9.1 million from property taxes.
Yes.
And that's what we're talking about in terms of the mills. Because I think Jed, when I asked him, it was 122 mills we currently levy? Around there? Yeah. Okay. And so we're talking about 10% of that.
Correct.
And so, and then if I'm reading this right, we get about $50 million in grants that are external from the city that we're not levying from you know, from the citizens of Kalispell in a direct way. Is that right?
I hate to, we get a lot of money in grants. I don't know if it's exactly 50 million. The enterprise funds make up, I believe, 65% of our budget.
108 million?
Yes, of the 180 million. So over 100 million of it is just enterprise funds, water, sewer,
108.
street maintenance, et cetera. Which those are assessments that go, that are separate from the property tax.
So the levy also is shown in our budget, even though the levy is for a specific thing. It's not something the city can just use for whatever, right? That's also misleading. So every time we have a levy on something, and the first year it's reported back, it looks like, wow, the city budget went up by $90 million this year. No, that was your levy for a specific purpose that just sits on our books and goes exactly toward what you voted it to go towards.
Yeah.
So it'd be nice to break some of that stuff out.
I could do that at final budget. I could lay it out. You know, a big part of even the enterprise funds is even the 100, we'll just say $100+ million number is misleading because a lot of that is loans coming in to fund a, you know, a water tower or a water tank. You know, we may have a $20 million loan that comes in, but that's not necessarily spending 20 million that year. That's a loan over a period of time. So it comes in as a revenue. So that isn't always that $100 million number is not, it's not like we're spending $100 million that year. So that can be misleading, and oftentimes that number carries over 4 or 5 years, just because that's how long a construction project could take.
What's
So-
the actual term for the Jafrita buffer?
I don't know what you're.
The 20% that we hold, that we keep in reserve. Is it just our reserve?
Just a reserve?
Okay, so all this discussion we're having up here, where does that leave our reserve?
21%.
So it's
It's
going
everything
to be
above-
21%.
We've been talking about everything above 20%.
Perfect. That's exactly what I wanted to hear. Okay, because,
And that's just general,
somebody's
that's
not dead
general
yet, but they
fund
would
too.
roll over in the grave if we violated that. So,
No, we're at 21.3 without this.
okay,
And it's-
perfect.
Is it 30 or 33% that governments are allowed and often recommended to go up to? 33?
Well, so what I believe we're right at the recommended state law is what? Yeah, 30 is what you could go up to, but I would say that, you could change the policy and go all the way up to 30 if you wanted. But typically, the council's looked at that as more of an emergency situation, not necessarily funding projects per se. That would be more to operate city business and city staffing
In
and
between budget.
pay payroll and things like that as their cycles. It hasn't typically been used as like a contingency account, although it has in an emergency situation at times been utilized for that. It's not the normal. It's really just to operate city businesses. So you could potentially go up and just leave it in that fund, but I think a better option would be to allocate it towards capital and then always have that goal of staying at the 21%, or sorry, 20%.
For going to
Okay.
that, I was just, it was like it was a local fund that was set up, is the way it came across. And I know
Well,
what you meant,
it
but
was,
the state-
it's available by the state. The city doesn't have to do it at all.
Right.
But it's available up to 30%.
I think in the past, the city wasn't even at 20%. There was a time where we weren't doing
were
it
below that.
hardly at all. We had
Yeah,
a reserve.
exactly.
So
That
I
was
think
about 15 years
20%
ago. It
was
wasn't very
something
long.
we
Yeah.
implemented because we weren't having that good practice of doing that.
A great example of something that we used this for in the past, that I voted against actually, was we were 1.5 million short on the Parkline Trail to finish it up. Well, it was 3 or 4 years ago. And we used part of our reserve to finish that out.
That was reimbursed though,
Yes,
back to the general fund, so yes,
Exactly.
yeah.
yep.
So when we're talking about 20% versus 30%, we're not talking about 20% off of the 189 million.
That'd be the
We're
general fund,
talking about 20% off of the general fund.
correct,
Okay, great. I just want to be clear. Thank you.
yes.
Yep.
And if you vote against something, don't go to the opening for it, I guess, because I did get a lot, I did get a lot of heat for that.
Practical political advice.
But I feel much better now that we're talking, we're keeping the 21%, so.
Do you have your direction on,
I do.
okay.
Amy and I do, yes.
No, we should probably point out the additional tax with the levy as well.
Yes.
So we had the 122 mills in the general fund,
60.9.
but there's another 60 mills from the levy.
Yeah, so people are gonna see a difference.
Which that did go dollar to dollar base, so it's kind of mill base, but we had to go to dollar base last year, which is what, 4.5 million? About 4.5 million is the emergency responder levy.
It's blank.
So is there a way that you could provide, I'm just thinking I'm going to get lots of questions from people. Can you give me the elevator speech of how to describe what's happening to the everyday person that I could explain also? So that it's helpful to understand, this is what we did. It's, I get the deferred maintenance, I'm thinking, but it's also these vignettes, right? This is how your playground will be. This is the morale of the workforce. This is the safety and condition of your streets. But also just this, when you put it in the case of your house, it's sort of, this is how much we're talking. I don't know, it might be helpful for just to have a way to communicate this in an everyday person's understanding if we've spent this much time.
So here's my.
Is there a way to do that?
There is.
Okay.
It's different for everybody. It's different for a small business owner on Main Street than it is a homeowner. But for a homeowner, the question is, for the median homeowner, is it worth a latte a day to be able to allocate some funds towards capital projects that the city's been doing deferred on for quite some time.
That's super helpful for me. One cookie crumble, yeah.
Yes,
Okay.
that's what it boils down to, and that's for, a higher end home is what it boils down to is because those demands are not gonna go away, the needs are not gonna go away. The ability to fund them, gets more and more difficult as time goes on. So I think, that is, the elevator speech is, I'm sure there's something in your neighborhood that you could point to that's deferred maintenance, and the idea would be that we would be trying to tackle those. And like I said, these funds were already budgeted, they just weren't spent.
Yep.
So I think that's part of it too. It's kind of, so essentially what we would be doing is just not budgeting or not using that money going into the next year's budget and milling less and taxing less to basically allocate our savings going into the next year's budget. But that doesn't mean we didn't have those needs that previous year. I think if that's the way to
Do we
phrase
have a
that.
deferred maintenance list?
Yeah, I mean, you're gonna, during the Parks Master Plan, you're probably gonna see
Well,
quite a bit of
that's
that
parks,
just in that.
right? Do we have a
Yes.
master city deferred maintenance
Yes,
list?
we have a 5-year capital plan that's got a lot of demands within it.
Well,
yes.
yeah, but basically what I'm asking is, do we know what these things are so we can prioritize them and knock the ones out we want to knock out?
Council would have plenty of options to tackle a number of these, yes.
Okay.
I'm
well,
not
can
gonna,
can
I'm
I
not
go
gonna
look at a
propose
list of
what they're
stuff?
gonna
I
be.
guess
That's
what
why
I'm
setting it
asking.
into a capital fund, anytime the council would decide to allocate these funds, it would require a budget amendment and they could do it at that time. But certainly the priority could just be right away, saving for that fire station, the fourth one, right away. You could do that as well, but the reality is that is a capital project as well going out into the future, but there's a number of needs even in the interim. For example, I mentioned the $350,000 chiller that the public safety building needs, that's over 25 years old. That's something that could be an immediate
Is that
checkoff.
evidence storage?
That's in our capital plan now, or our facilities maintenance plan.
Is that chiller used for evidence storage? Is that correct? No?
Nope, that's just the cooling of the building.
Oh, okay.
You said a latte a day, it'd be
$7.
$7 a day.
Let me get, so,
It depends on how much your house.
an
is.
$800,000 house is $7.74 a day. So I even went to the high end. A $550,000 house is $4.69
You couldn't even get a
Per mil.
per month. Per month.
Yes,
Per
thank
month.
you.
Per month, sorry.
That's where I was,
Sorry, you're asking me a
numbers I
lot
was
of questions.
thinking of.
$4.69 per month.
Thank you. That's what I
There
was
you
getting
go,
at.
there you go.
Per month, per mil.
Per mil per month.
Yes.
So $40 a month is what it boils down to. For a $550,000 house, it varies. Like I said, commercial is gonna be higher, small business is gonna be higher, depending on the value. Commercial's even gotten more expensive with the shift, so a mil is higher than that for a commercial building. So.
Anything else?
That's all I got.
So I want to open it up for public comment. Before I do, I wanted to address, I know there's been some concern about the 3-minute limit, and kind of the loose approach to that. So I wanted to explain myself on that. So there's a number of reasons why I'm somewhat, I might take more than 3 minutes to explain it. I do have one of those though, sorry. No, so there's a number of reasons why I'm somewhat loose on that. To begin with, Mayor Johnson was fairly loose on that. And I felt that set a precedent that I wanted to respect. And I also feel like if I changed it, one, that we would hear feedback that all of a sudden we're excluding people, we're not taking the public comment, maybe that there's bias in how it's being applied to who, and especially with a new mayor. And especially if any of you track the online comments about me, you can imagine if I got strict about that when Mayor Johnson was not, what that would look like in public comment. So that's one thing. Another thing is I feel like if people don't feel like they're being listened to, that you might have a room full of people who are angry that will take a lot longer in public comment than allowing that one person to have their say and go over the limit a little bit. And also last fall, talking to the community, one of the things I heard a lot about is concern about that engagement with the city. It's why I've encouraged staff to reply to all the emails we get, why I've implemented the town halls on fifth Mondays, why I've reached out to community groups to speak to them. And I feel like it would be counter to that to then implement a stricter approach to the public comment. Also, I've been on the other side of that lectern a lot in my life as an advocate for issues. I can say that, at least for me, it's very difficult to provide substantive comments on complex, detailed issues like the ones we deal with in 3 minutes. So there's nothing more frustrating than feeling like you are providing that substantive comment, stuff you put a lot of time and effort into researching, doing your homework, and then be told your time's up. And I think the experience has shown us in the past, whether it's Tronstad, the Warming Center, and so forth, that we get substantive comment that can go on for a little while. Folks really offering what I thought was valuable comment, but they took 8 minutes or whatever to do it. So obviously, I will, it's not endless, as I did last week. If people are starting to ramble and repeating stuff, I will ask to sum it up, to finish up, and I try to remind the public that we do have officially the 3 minute limit and try to be concise in that. So I wanted to offer that. I didn't mean to open this up to a discussion. So if during council reports, if you'd like to add something, Mr. Dowdy, at that point.
Sure.
Yeah. So with that, I'd like to open up to public comment. If you like to address the council, step to the mic, state your name, or raise your hand if you're online. And you just heard what I gave, so please keep that in mind.
Good evening. Thank you for having me. I appear before you to address the introduction of flock safety cameras.
Can you please state your name?
John McDonald.
Thank you.
The technology has been introduced into our community and introduced into the budget in 2027, $70,000 in the proposed fiscal year for 2027. It advanced through the Parking Advisory Board with only limited public discussion at the May 26th work session. It is deeply troubling and frankly shameful that this council has permitted advanced surveillance technology to be inserted into the regular city budget with so little meaningful public scrutiny, full vendor disclosure, transparent data policies, or independent oversight. Taxpayer dollars are funding a private for-profit company that are engaged in the mass monitoring and data collection of ordinary citizens. We already give up so much of our personal information to everyday corporate and private companies on a daily basis through our phones, apps, and online lives. Now this council wants to subject us to being monitored 24/7 by yet another privately owned company, one that puts profits ahead of America's best interests and our constitutional rights. We are the community members, not cattle or livestock, that this government can harvest data and potentially monetize our own personal data by choosing to fund this private surveillance apparatus with public money. You are actively working against the very people you were elected to serve. Supporting this goes against basic laws, and the Fourth Amendment protects every American from this danger. You should be deeply ashamed of yourselves for even allowing these systems to be considered in the first place. Each of you took an oath to uphold the Constitution and serve the people of Kalispell. By allowing this to move forward with minimal debate, you are failing that oath and betraying the trust of the residents placed in you. You are not acting in the public's best interest. Mayor Hunter, you campaigned on bringing transparency, accountability, and fair, responsible decisions to Kalispell. Yet this significant surveillance expenditure advanced with almost no public input or robust oversight. That gap between your words and this process will not go unnoticed by the people you represent. You are not acting in the public's best interest. This technology raises direct and serious concerns under the Fourth Amendment, which protects against unreasonable searches and seizures. Montana law already places strict limits on the use of license plate readers. Deploying these systems against law-abiding citizens who have committed no wrongdoing constitutes an unnecessary and invasive expansion of government and corporate surveillance. This is not what the public elected you to do. If this council wishes to retain any remaining trust of the people and expects to continue serving in public office, you must immediately act with far greater transparency and accountability. The residents of Kalispell deserve to know exactly how their money is being spent, what safeguards, if any, exist to protect their privacy. You owe us that much. I therefore call on this body to immediately pause all further implementation and expansion of these cameras and monitoring systems and convene a dedicated public hearing that provides complete disclosure of the vendor, all contract terms, data retention and sharing policies, oversight mechanisms, and an independent legal review of compliance with state and federal law, which in my eyes is clearly being violated. Can the council please explain how this proposal complies with Montana law and what independent legal review has been done on the data retention and sharing practices? Furthermore, if this council continues to refuse to uphold our laws and defend our privacy rights, the residents of Kalispell will find and support better morally focused community members who will willingly do so. I want to be absolutely clear. I will be at every city council meeting with this point forward until these flock cameras are gone and there is no longer any budget allocated for them in this city. I'm more than happy to keep explaining the very obvious and important laws that you seem to have no problem breaking for the 3 minutes of time that I am allowing. This is not how a responsible government treats its citizens, and each of you should go home tonight and take a good long look in the mirror and ask yourself if you feel comfortable treating your taxpayer constituents like cattle that you spy on 24/7. If you feel comfortable continuing down this dangerous path, then you should not be in a position of public office. I promise that the more cameras get installed, the more people that will show up here defending their rights. The time for quiet approvals and limited debate is over. The people are watching and they expect you to uphold the Constitution and the public trust, not to erode it for private gain.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I appreciate everybody for being here tonight because we all have a say in the community. But anyways, my name is Jacob Bodine, local, born and raised. But there's a couple issues in this budget that I'd like to address that don't quite sit right with me. I'd like to address our new city manager and his costs. They are a little high. Compared to Missoula and the other cities around us, he's making well over between, on the low end, $50,000 to $75,000 $1,000 more than much larger cities in the area, and I just don't see the need for that. He could be special. I don't know who you are. You haven't proven anything to me, showing your expertise, and even this meeting today, I heard a lot of filler of, oh, we're going to become more efficient, and we're going to make 2 jobs 1 job, and okay, we're doubling the workload, but decreasing the pay and increasing your pay, and that just doesn't sit right with me. And the other problem I'd like to address would be the flock camera issue as well. I have lived in a few major cities at this point in my life, and they're just about everywhere. And when I can run away to Montana and hide in the woods and nobody knows where I am, that's why I'm here. That's why a lot of us are here. And flock, unfortunately, in its early years of 2017, took large amounts of money from Palantir. And in today's world and politics, Palantir plays a role in a lot of our lives in the data collection and holding of our private information. And I just don't think it's right that we need to keep funding that when a lot of Montanans' main goal truly is their solitude, their quiet life, they're around nature, they're not being under the microscope of a camera 24/7. If we wanted to be China, we would be China, but here we are in Montana with the sticks. going back into that flock issue a little bit more that I haven't heard anybody address is over the last 5 years alone, there's been 22 cases of police officers who have used flock or these other license plate reader technologies to stalk and harass their former wives, girlfriends, their wives' new husbands. There's 22 officers that have pled guilty throughout the entire nation, 5 just this year in 2026, for offenses related to stalking or overuse of these securities that were implemented in hopes of providing safety to the community. Rather, it's becoming a detriment to the community and creating a liability for the city, the police, and it's not like we need to be paying out on those issues because of one bad cop or one dirty guy in the long run. So I think those are some things that we really need to iron out. I mean, I'm a single male in America. There's not a whole lot I need to be afraid of, but I really care for our women and children, especially in this community, between all the trafficking on the Indian reservations of people that you hear their name once and it's on a billboard for 5 years and it slowly peels away. And clearly I don't think these flock cameras are gonna really solve any of those issues of trafficking or domestic violence. It's gonna catch your speeders and maybe somebody that threw some trash out a window, but it's in the long run, we're paying and maintaining a useless object. It's like having a new computer. Yes, we're paying $70,000 this year, but there's going to be maintenance and operating the next following year. We're going to have to update cameras because somebody shot one out with a BB gun or somebody stole the copper and gold out of it because our ever-growing homeless issue in this community. And frankly, those are the 2 major objections I have with this budget is dumping a bunch of money not into the potholes and parks, but rather cameras to watch everybody, and our lovely new city manager making more than just about all of the other communities around us, rather than putting that money to better use in the community or hiring more staff instead of doubling jobs or workloads for the others. When we're just frivolously spending this money on his car allotment that he gets, or the $200,000 a year that he gets to make in comparison to the same position in Missoula where you're only making $175,000 a year. Just doesn't make quite a lot of sense to me. Anyways, that's all I have to say, and thank you all for your time.
Thank you.
Don't represent Montana Fence right now, and it's kind of more quiet Q&A if we can kind of talk freely. I was wondering how the budget went with the hospital helicopter. And
We're not doing Q&A, just provide your comment for the council. Yeah.
I think you guys are doing all right. From what I heard, that we're having to ship a lot of elderly over to Libby because we're having a problem with beds. I didn't know if anybody heard anything about that. And I guess I'll talk to you in a minute about the public parks and recreation. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. What's that?
If you are online and would like to provide public comment, please raise your hand.
Okay. All right, seeing no further public comment, Mr. Negrin, City Manager report.
Yeah, and just to clarify as well, because there was a bit of confusion there. So 550,000, which is the median house value in Kalispell, is $469 per mil per month. So a latte per month, not per day. Yes. Once again, that's just a $550,000 house. Other than that, moving forward into next week, had public hearings, work sessions, et cetera, the previous months on the water, sewer, and wastewater facility plans. So those will be up for council consideration next week. And that's all I got for tonight.
Council reports, Mr. Dowd, start with you.
Thanks. Okay, first off, the right of individual privacy is essential to the well-being of a free society and shall not be infringed without showing of a compelling state interest. That's the Montana Constitution. I've been spouting that for a couple months now. In our discussion of the parking system, this came up. One of my requirements to support this at all is that but we create a policy. It's only used for parking enforcement, period. No sharing to any other departments or anything. And we'll never buy the brand name Flock if I have anything to do with it, because that is the biggest danger word right now in the liberty movement. Flock cameras are the devil. Anyway, they will not be stationary. They will not have facial recognition hooked up to them. They're license plate readers only for parking enforcement, period. Not for traffic enforcement, just for parking enforcement. So be looking in the near future for this policy that we're going to put into our Kalispell policies about these cameras, because the other thing is they're not mounted stationary to be viewing everybody. They're going to be attached to parking enforcement vehicles. Okay? And basically this will take the place of somebody having to chalk tires. So I'm glad that you brought that up. I actually meant to bring it up earlier when we were talking about this. But that's where I sit on it. As a council here, we're very shortly, hopefully, going to have a work session on this policy. And I would be happy to draft something up and forward it to everybody for review prior to that if you want me to. And if I drank 170 lattes every month, I'd probably die. By the way. So we are talking about 1 mil out of all the mills that we do tax. So I just want everybody to be cognizant of that. It sounds really cheap, but it starts to stack up, and that's only for private homeowners. That is not for the taxes for the corporate taxes the commercial taxes are way higher. That's all I had. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor. I know we're not supposed to do this, but I'm going to take on the public comment about our city manager, in part to defend half this council. Half these folks weren't even involved in the hiring. They were certainly invited to look over the resumes that we had, but I want to defend half the council that he was hired before this new council came on. That being said, a very tight council, very thrifty council, and the going market for good city managers is up to $220,000 a year. We spend much less on that. I'm not going to debate with you. I'm just telling you where I'm coming from. Not only did we hire a fine manager with years of experience working with a former city manager, I felt it was a great interview process. We had other options out there, and we ended up with more value for the buck than we could have imagined. I think sometimes people aren't familiar with what these going rates are or a stipend of a car. It happens in city government, and it happens in county government. And I really wanted to just say only a few of us were involved, and this manager was well vetted, well qualified, and I'm pleased we have him.
Yeah, thanks. I did want to say thanks to staff for putting together this budget. Answering to 9 opinionated people does not sound like a fun job, and it can't be easy. So I appreciate you. Appreciate everything you do, Jared. And when we're looking at these salaries too, we also have to understand that there's a lot of different styles of government in the state. Missoula, for example, has a full-time mayor. They're kind of the city manager, so to speak. Okay. That's fine. But my point is that we don't have a full-time mayor. Jared is the supreme leader of Kalispell that's how he is in my phone anyway. So there is a substantive difference. In regards to the flock cameras, we're not doing wholesale surveillance of our city. It's absolutely essential to me as well. We've had substantive conversations with the police chief about this. We've been very clear about what we want to see. Missoula and a lot of other communities have very specific license plate readers and are used specifically for that. I can understand that there is some concern about some of these companies and what their data retention policies are and how it can be used and how it can be abused. I think before we sign anything, I'm very interested in seeing what those policies are as we look for a vendor to do this. But I just want to be very clear that we are not doing wholesale surveillance. I took an oath to the Constitution as a lawyer, as a city council member, and I take those extremely seriously. The last thing I want to say is 656 people took what's it called? Driver's Ed last year through Kalispell Public Schools. My law partner is the chair of the school board, and she wanted me to pass on that information because they are doing education and some very essential education. That's it.
Thank you, Mr. Dodd. Thank you for, again, your proponents of having policies. I look forward to having those conversations because I do think that is, I think, important to a lot of us on the council to make sure that we're limited in what we're looking at for. And like we said, we had those conversations with law enforcement. I also just want to thank the council for entertaining my conversation a little bit about roosters. I do think that it just sort of brought up something where, again, I think we're having that larger conversation about compliance, which brought up that issue of like, do you think that there's some cleanup there that we can all agree on and maybe find? And I think that we've sort of talked about, if it starts off as a limited, if it's 20, 30, that's a start, but that helps us with communication, but also helps us get to the spot when we have a staff member, they can see the direction that we're going with what type of enforcement we have, because we don't want to have frivolous enforcement out there. And it sounds like a really good 4-H student that you have coming in who might have a prize chicken or two. So I'm happy to also see that we live in a community that is, again, primarily rural. And it's great to see great things like 4-H actually being included in city limits, not just in our county residents, but so many people are really passionate about this and obviously caring a lot about their rooster. Yep. So thank you all for entertaining that conversation.
Well, as a new person, I just want to thank the council for allowing me to ask questions to try to understand. Sorry if it's opinionated. It's more just me trying to figure out am I making the right decision on using the whole data and making sure I understand it. So thank you so much for taking the time to entertain my questions and the public for having to listen through all my questions, which you probably already know. At least in your case, you're here every Monday night since I've been here. So I bet you could teach me a few things. We should go for a walk. Yeah. And in terms of the drivers that I did some research as well. And, it's interesting. I learned the State Farm didn't, in the case of my kids, and in all kids now, doesn't give you a reduction in your insurance because the data doesn't show that driver's ed actually reduces car accident. It's a grade point average. That's why you submit your grade point averages. So just to even further that conversation was, I'm doing a lot of research because of what comes up here. And point taken, thank you for bringing up Palantir and Flock. I will do more reading on that. I think I need to be educated on that, so I appreciate that. I will look into it. And then finally, no, I wasn't here when we set the budget, but I have found Mr. Nygren to be incredibly responsive, incredibly engaged, and incredibly informed, and I really appreciate your leadership. Thank you.
Only thing I have is I don't want you to take offense of my comment of having to sell paper and ink back there. I didn't mean it quite that way, but sometimes when you see those big numbers up there and doesn't feel like the rest of the story all gets out there sometimes. So that's all I was trying to say. So other than that, I have nothing else.
Just thanks to everybody for the conversations. It's all really good conversations to have to make sure we're all on the same page with all this stuff. And thank you, Sid, for bringing it up again. I'm totally on the same page with you as far as the surveillance cameras and the license plate cameras. The company that rhymes with clock won't even exit my mouth at the moment. I'm so disheartened with them and all that. So no, none of that will be happening as long as I can help it. So, but thank you for everybody. This is great conversations.
Yeah, a couple things. So, one, I also, Mr. Dowd, agree with you fully. In fact, this has come up. This is not the first time this has come up in our discussion of the license plate readers. And I generally got the sense that the council is more or less on the same page on this, that we don't want to set up a surveillance system, that we want a policy that's going to make sure that it's limited. So, strident public comment aside from somebody who apparently is showing up to a meeting for the first time, maybe is not familiar with the discussions we've had in previous meetings. It'd be good to kind of inform yourself of that before having very critical comments on it. So, I think the council is united on that, and we have had conversations on this before. So I appreciate your comments, Mr. Dow. I agree with them fully. And then on the city manager pay, Mr. Fisher, I agree with your comments fully as well. When we did the selection and the hire, we did look at the average pay of a city manager for similar communities in the state. That's how the salary was determined. So we're confident that it's in that range. In fact, I do believe it's a little bit under. And I agree that Mr. Nygren is doing a fantastic job, and so I couldn't be happier that we've selected him. So with that, we're adjourned.